Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. We are online at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find the link to our blog in the episode notes. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, share your favorite episode, and jot down our information wherever you find this. My name's Andy Libson. I'm a teacher from Oakland and a socialist. And today we are again joined by socialist community organizer Kenny Zepeda, and no longer special guest, but now I guess ongoing What's Left contributor Jessica, who teaches English literature, writing, and environmental humanities at the university level in the Pacific Northwest. So welcome, both of you. And today we're going to talk about probably the first good news there's been to talk about in some time, and that is this trucker convoy that is going on in Ottawa, or in Canada, that I believe started in Vancouver and has been traveling across Canada and has reached Ottawa, I think, just this last weekend. And from my understanding, it's like, 60 miles of trucks? It's a 60-mile long convoy, or maybe it was 60-kilometer, up to 40-mile long convoy. Longest convoy in history. I've seen some crazy footage of it, of just going on and on and on, and people being over bridges, and it's super cold in Canada, and people are cheering them on. And now I guess they're in Ottawa, and they're just kind of camped out there with a bunch of trucks, as well as other locations. And I just think it's amazing news, because it seems to have really changed the minds of people in Canada. I'll just give one detail that I have, and then I'd like to hear from other folks. There was a poll taken on January 27th and 28th, found that 54% of the people in Canada want the restrictions. Again, this is what this stuff was about, was on the anti-vaccine mandates, anti-vaccine passports, and the overall just atmosphere of restrictiveness and lockdowns that are in Canada. And that's largely what has animated this convoy. And supposedly 54% now want restrictions to be lifted, compared to 39% who want the restrictions lifted when the same question was asked 2 weeks earlier. So minds are being changed in Canada right now. And even though it's been kind of not dealt with in the mainstream media, it's been big news for any one of us paying attention to this stuff and looking for signs of hope, and big news for people looking for finally the fight back taking place in North America.
So I've talked about my ties to Canada. I have some family there, friends that came to my wedding, when I was married. And so I knew a little bit my cousin who passed away. We would talk about this stuff, and he would express that, how different, slightly different Canada, were more restrictive in some ways than we were here, even in San Francisco. I remember that they didn't reopen fully until last September, when the rest of the US was by and large open. So they had restrictions that, were I guess lagging behind even the US, so restrictions on movement. And also I know that in Montreal, at least, they have a QR code system that is widely used. Mm-hmm. And I actually witnessed this when I went to bury my cousin. We actually had more difficulty entering the food courts than entering the country. Even though to enter the country, you do not need a QR code. That actually was mentioned by the speaker of this convoy. And so I personally have seen this system, to enter Canada and the border situation. And I also went to Mexico during COVID, and that was not the case. So there's definitely a different level of, this advancement of these technologies that we've been criticizing, and that come up in the conversations about, around this convoy. So I just wanted to mention, that at least in my experience, is the case. It's true. There's a different system, at least in Montreal when I went and visited recently. And just to enter Canada, you have to have this application and register your vaccination. And, and then the QR code is provided, and you need that to enter.
Yeah, I feel like Canada, along with Australia and a few other places, I mean, they've really been subjected to some of the most draconian, just crazy policies these past 2 years. And I mean, who would have thought it would be Canadians, you know, because the stereotype, right, is like, oh, they're so nice, they're so compliant, right? And that kind of they have been, you know, largely compliant, it seems like, thus far. But you push people too far. Like, you push people too far. And I'm just, yeah, I'm really, really just proud of everybody up there, and excited. And yeah, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, just kind of like a swelling of like, yeah, it's a good feeling. So I'm sure we're going to talk about, you know, any skeptical things. And yeah, sorry, go ahead, Kenny.
I just didn't expect Canada to do this, to be honest, out of all places.
Yeah.
You know, so like, I'm curious as to, you know, obviously what you're mentioning, you know, it's push people too far. But even this place that is considered a better place than the US in some ways, you know, like, we all talk about their healthcare and all, you know, this stuff, and like, they are very strict in so many ways, like, you know, like, even like labor, you know, just like, when I talk to the people that I know, they tell me there is no undocumented workers in Canada, because to be able to work there is so hard. Because, you know, like, even my cousins who work in construction, you have to have so many permits, and they check all the time, you know. And so they are used to these actually policies of, you know, that are kind of draconian, and like, they are used to enforcing the law. I know that, for example, in Montreal, you know, I've seen like soccer van trucks, you know, the stereotype of the soccer mom, you know, they are police. I've seen pickups like the look disheveled and stuff. They are police. They will throw their lights on you. So they are kind of used to this stuff. So I think that is why it's even more interesting that this is happening right now.
Well, I think that's a pretty good segue to at least show this one clip in light of what Kenny's saying, because what for me is so, well, one of the things that's so amazing about this, let's see, where is this? Right here. Nope, not that guy. This thing, is the fact that, like, things are changing so rapidly, and you know, Kenny and I, you know, Marxists, we talk about the working class, but we don't get to see much of them doing much. And here you see when one sector of the working class, and it's not even the entire sector of it, you know, these are not all Canadian truckers, like, meaning it's not every trucker in Canada being part of this. It is a sector of the working class from the part of transportation, you know, from that sector of transportation. But you can see when just a section of them becomes organized and starts to make demands, that it actually creates a tremble throughout the system. Much more so than just like hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating on, not just on a Saturday, but even on a Wednesday. Like, a sector of the working class that's organized and that's doing something in relationship to a demand on the state or on corporations, it makes it makes everything tremble and makes everything seem suddenly new, potentially. And that's what to me is like so exciting, is in many ways, particularly as I see workers becoming more and more atomized, and I actually feel like that's part of the plan, to see a section of the working class reorganize itself and make a push like this. It's an affirmation for me of the possibility of what Marxist politics speak to about changing the world. And it
is a strike, right? I mean, yeah, we're calling it a convoy, but it's also a strike.
Yeah, and it's self-directed work action that the Canadian Trucker Alliance actually says we don't want anything to do with it. Like, they're against what they're doing. And so, like, these folks have just taken it into their own hands. I'm going to show this video because, again, let me see. I think it's amazing what's taking place.
All right, this is some pretty big news, everyone. So that U.S.-Canada border blockade in between Alberta and Montana. So trucks are lined up as far as the eye can see, blocking the border. and they've all parked there and told everyone they're going to camp out, just like they're doing it as part of this overall Freedom Convoy protest. The police have set up barricades on the highways to block people from getting through. They apparently have been trying to get tow trucks to come in and help remove the vehicles. Well, guess what? Looks like the tow trucks showed up, but they're not going to help. They refuse to help the authorities, and they're joining in. Oh, and it gets even better. It gets even better. The farmers are joining the protest as well. And so they weren't going to take any of this crap, and they broke right through the police barricade to join the truckers in solidarity. Check this out. This is phenomenal. The police are powerless to do anything about it.
There they go! Woo! Go, truckers, go! In the coop! Oh, you see them now? The cops, those mothers. There they go. It's up to you. Here we go. Might as well. More the merrier. Woo!
Crowds filled up Parliament Hill once again. A bunch of truck drivers decided to set up a hockey game on the streets downtown. What could be more Canadian than that? They're digging their heels in. Oh, and speaking of tow trucks not helping out,
Okay, I just sitting in my truck here warming up. I just got a bunch of nice fruit dropped off to me. And I was just talking to this gentleman, and this nice lady came by and had something to share with everybody.
You want me to say it?
Yeah. What just happened here?
Okay, I was just talking to a local that lives right here in Ottawa. He's been here for 30 years. He knows what's happening. And he told me that the mayor of Ottawa he called the tow truck companies to start towing these semis off from the streets. And every company said they have COVID.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Justin. We'll be gone by yesterday.
oh, I don't know why, but this all just puts me in a really good mood today.
So for me, that is like just those sorts of stories of, truckers breaking or farmers breaking over police barricades and tow truckers, not only not refusing to move trucks, but actually joining the protest. You can see those people who are filming it. They just joined when they saw the farmers joining in. That to me is what change is about. It shows the possibility of change from below. And it doesn't seem like something that can just be controlled. And just one other thing, and this, I probably won't show the whole story, or the whole interview, but the guy, some of the lead organizers, and I think it might be the same person you saw who was interviewed. He was interviewed on Tucker Carlson, but he did a press conference with another woman, another guy who was part of the core of people who are partial leaders of this, and they were basically saying, "Look, we're against what Justin Trudeau is doing in terms of the tyranny that the Liberal government is pushing forward." But he goes, if you look in who are the mayors of many of the other provinces where this is happening, they're part of the Conservative Party. So they've already said, we're not for the Liberals and we're not for the Conservatives. And they've had Conservatives come and say they want to speak, and even people who say they support them, and they're refusing to let them speak because they're basically saying, we're not letting a politician, take this over, and have been critical of both sides. And trying to say that, we're trying to unite Canada. and unite Canadian workers, although maybe they wouldn't put it in terms of workers, but I would. So those are some pretty good signs to me of the potential for fighting this thing from the vantage point of organized working class.
Yeah, I think that point about rejecting support from any politician, because I saw them say that like very clearly in a press conference they did the other day, and I mean that is key. Like, it's really not a partisan movement, and also, I mean, like we saw in the video, it's not just truckers. I mean, you have farmers, you have all sorts of people coming out to support this, and then even people who are not actually part of the convoy. You know, just seeing the footage of all of these gatherings over, you know, on the overpasses, cheering them on as they were on their way there, in like 20 below, freezing temperatures. And I mean, if nothing else, that tells you people are talking, people are gathering face to face, right? And that's an incredible sign. And I think too, just wherever this goes, because I'm sure we'll talk about some of the potential problems that we can encounter and the media smearing and all of that. But I think even just the psychological effect of this is huge. I'm like that poll's a good example that you cited, Andy. I mean, I always take polls with several grains of salt, but you see, like, it's already spreading, and you're getting trucker convoys all over the world. They're talking about doing it here to DC. It's happening in Australia. And so I think just the psychological like buildup of energy and hope is huge, because so many people have just been so goddamn depressed the past 2 years, just stuck, feeling hopeless. So it feels like a real shift and a real opportunity.
Just want to reiterate the points that you both make about staying independent, right, from political parties. We have plenty of experience in the U.S. with especially the left, or falling behind the lesser of the two evils, right, and seeing how the scalps of these movements are displayed they're displayed at the halls of the fucking Democratic Party, and like they have plenty of blood in their hand, of movements that have died, because being co-opted by parties, and it happens on both sides, not just liberals, right, conservatives, and like I think there's a massive misreading, right, of what Trump represented, and in some ways he was something, a big fuck you to like the establishment of the Republican Party. Even though he ultimately still played the role, right, to benefit, the system and the ruling class, he was still useful to set us up for this anti-science, quote unquote, anti-vax. If you question science, you're, but I guess the point is that that's super important on any movement, to stay independent from, any of the political channels, because they will co-opt it and ultimately destroy it and use it against you. And so that's very remarkable that they're exposing that. And the other thing is that let's not forget, this isn't like just about it's about everything, and like that's what was impressive. It's about this digital bullshit that they're being exposed to, right? The spokesperson, I don't know if you have the clip, Lipson, but he talked about how in the Tucker Carlson show, that is also very, very peculiar to me, because from my vantage point, it seems like the actually conservative channels, Fox News, they've hijacked a lot of language and subject matter that should be a leftist issue. They've definitely hijacked it, and they still manipulate, and they still, to create this polarizing force. But they they give voice to these people, so automatically it's discounted in the U.S., right? Oh, if Fox News is covering this, then it's some right wing fucking bullshit. And even though like I absolutely agree with what they're talking about, right? Like the spokesperson talked about the restrictions and this QR codes and all this technology, because he mentioned in that interview that people can go look at themselves, where he was approaching the border and he had his QR code, the one I mentioned that I had to provide to my border officer in Canada. And the officer told him, "Oh, don't worry about it. The system already ping you, and we already know that you're coming, basically." So they have all these technologies that are coming live that we've been warning about. That people are called crazy for talking about these dystopian futures. We talked about vaccine mandates. We talked about vaccine passports. And then we, at least from my vantage point, this is more about immigration than a public health crisis, quote unquote. This is about freedom of movement. This is about controlling where people are at all times. And not the truckers obviously have a big incentive to fight this, right? Because it's making their lives more difficult. As workers that cross these borders, relatively freely, right? Because the U.S. and Canada, it's easier to pass this border than the Mexico and U.S. border. Canada is essentially, in my mind, like another state of the U.S. So we have sports teams and whatever. But the point is that it's more than just like one thing, and it's growing and it's defiance, and it takes resisting and fighting against all this mirroring, right? Like this is an unlawful assembly. That's what I've been hearing a lot on the news. And this mirroring is beginning. And if you don't have a understanding of what's happening beyond like the headlines, then you're gonna fall with that narrative. And you're gonna think that there's like just some right wingers, some crazy people. That's one of my coworkers told me that, like, who reads the BBC, and that's where he gets his BBC, like more, according to him, objective news. That weird people are in that convoy. I see we're not supposed to talk to weird people, right? Like people that think different than us. And so he already dismissed the narrative, and he was saying, and then people are talking about this right-wing thing. No, I have friends who are not fucking white, who are not right-wingers. They're just tired of the shit. People that live in Canada, and they're just tired of it,
Yeah, the whole white supremacist, racist right-winger smear, like, it's just so outrageous. Like, watch any footage of it. You've got First Nations, tribal members, you've got huge representation from Sikh truckers and the Sikh community, right? Like out there, providing food for everybody. Just people of all races, all political backgrounds, and a lot of women too. I was actually, I'm in a women's circle, and actually quite a few of the women in it are Canadians, and actually a few of them have gone out the past couple of days. And we were kind of talking about the sort of machismo, working class culture that I think can be, kind of pervasive at times among groups like truckers, and just kind of, I don't know, a lot of us were just feeling like, on the one hand, there's problems with that, right? Like, I do think there's an issue with that among the working class just broadly. But how awesome to finally have like some fucking men like standing up and being angry. And because obviously there's some excellent exceptions, two of them here, right? But a lot of the people who've been leading this fight these past 2 years are women. So I think it's really cool to see, just, I don't know, there's such an amazing, just culture of solidarity, I think, among truckers from my limited experience. I remember just even a few years ago, myself and my colleagues, like we were on strike. We did a short strike for wages and healthcare and stuff, and among academic employees. And I remember like being out there like 6 a.m. on the picket line, and the first people to honor that picket line were the delivery truck drivers. Like, they showed up saw a picket line, and it wasn't even impressive, like, you know, whatever. It's just a bunch of graduate employees. And they got right on the phone. Everybody turned around. They were calling each other. So they're organized. They understand working class solidarity. So, I mean, it's the perfect people to be leading this. And there's really no like centralized leadership, it seems like, too, which I think is another really powerful component of it. Like, there's not really anybody to like hold up and smear and whatever. Like, I mean, there's organizers for sure, but I mean, it seems like a real authentic grassroots movement.
Yeah, and even the person who both Kenny and I have seen, I don't know what his name is, who saw the press conference, notes like, yeah, we're leading a section of some sort, but basically there's so many different sectors coming together of the truck driver movement that it isn't, you can't just say, well, that's the person or that's the group that kind of is running this thing. And I think currently that actually is a strength, or at the very least, all you can say is it shows that it's coming from the grassroots, and that is going to make it, that in addition to what you said there, Jessica, about not trying to align themselves with or find political politicians who they can get up next to try to move their agenda. Staying independent of that, I think, is going to be a big thing for their future and for the potential of this movement growing in a way that really draws more sectors, more workers into it across the world. And it has really, like I have not figured, like I got to the point, like, I don't know how we're going to stop this, like, is the working class just too atomized, and really just in a week, it's really completely changed my mind as to the possibility, if we as workers could do something, that we could actually really do, we could stop this. Like, and that's just to see the working class is actually capable of completely taking the ball out of the capitalist hands. I think and this is only a small section of it taking action. I imagine, like, again, teachers have their heads so fixed that I can't really imagine it right now. But if you could see teachers do a similar thing with an awareness of, no, we're not going to let you vaccinate children. No, we're not going to let you force everyone to be wearing masks. No, we're not going to let you bring in ed tech and just turn the world into a metaverse for our students and for us. Teachers could completely change the game in terms of what's happening right now if we were so inclined. I mean, unfortunately, like we've noted before, it's that so-called educated section of the workforce that has been the most backwards and the most had its head up its ass the most. And it's this group, truckers, who are often considered, the butt of jokes, at least in the United States, of like that's the ignorant section of the working class. Well, those are the ones who seem to have the best understanding of solidarity, the best understanding of the actual political dangers that workers and other workers across the globe are facing. Whereas teachers are completely not only walking into a trap, they're playing a Pied Piper role of helping other children build this trap of a prison for ourselves instead of fighting it. So it just reminds me of for me, the truth of Marxism, like the possibility of the working class can change the world. And to see a little sector of it operating this way is amazing. The thing that's also crazy to me, though, is to watch socialists either say nothing about this, or, like in the World Socialist website, actually condemn it as fascistic, as representing, forces that would push for January 6th, as, being so freedom loving that they just want to have the freedom to infect anyone and let the pandemic rage across the society. They don't really say that these people should be just supporting the liberal government, but effectively that's what they are left with, and it's insane to me that you actually see an organized section of the working class coming together to resist the state and resist corporate power, resist Silicon Valley, and socialists are condemning it as fashion.
I saw one of those. Did you see that meme going around that was like, you know, like the left yelling like seize the means of production, and then it's like the truckers do it, and it's like, no, don't do that.
No.
I just want to read. This is the Communist Party of Canada.
Oh God.
Put out this tweet. Okay, it says the show in Ottawa is really about ultra-right demanding profits come before health in all cases. We need broad unity to expose #FluTrucksClan, but only fundamental change to defeat COVID, raise wages and living standards, ban hate, and curb corporate power could stop rising fascism. Get out. Come on.
At the same time, I'm not surprised personally, like, you know, because I do, you know, Lips, and I read your comment on Facebook in the group, you know, where you said that you were ashamed to be called a Marxist for the last two years, you know, to have your name next to a lot of people, you know, who call themselves Marxists. And quite honestly, this is a complete disgrace. And like, you know, in terms of, obviously, even Marxism is not one thing, you know, people have different interpretations. That's the reality. You know, that's what we have to have debates about things and conversations, and to see if there is continuity in our principles and values and analysis of what's happening. And the truth is that all these people that call themselves Marxists, that have these platforms, organizations that are honestly, you know, Lipson, you've had this experience, very cult-like to themselves in a way. You know, they've failed in the analysis. They've failed in understanding what's happening. It's a very superficial analysis of capitalism that I would expect from some fucking liberal, you know, and they're actually right in step with each other. You know, Marxists, even anarchists, honestly, like anarchists that are supposedly about, you know, that I follow, that I read, they're lockstep, and they're afraid to pay the price of going against the mainstream narrative. You know, so as far as they get to the, you know, to the fringe of almost criticizing it, but they won't, you know, because there is a high cost to pay. And so it just infuriates me, you know, that we, you know, the left that is supposed to have the analysis of this moment doesn't have it, right? And speaking, like, there's so many accounts, right? Instagram, I'm that generation, that I follow that have completely stayed silent. And when they do speak up, they do what they did in that website that you just mentioned, Jessica. They smear, they completely, you know, fall into that binary. If you're not with our exact set of principles that are mostly liberal, then you're a right winger. And so that narrative has just completely taken everyone. And there is no seeing outside of that narrative. You know, and a lot of it has been built through identity politics, to be honest. You know, and so the sad part here is that, you know, in order to interrogate this, you know, for so much that the liberals care about people, oppressed people, it's going to take the oppressed to deconstruct this bullshit of identity politics that's ultimately affecting against the most oppressed. You know, because like 2 years on, you know, like my mother, right, who helped me organize some of the delivery of food that we did with the organizations that I've helped fund. She tells me that these families are still struggling. They're still missed the help that they got before, you know, because the damage that the pandemic has done is it goes beyond, you know, like anything that is being talked in the media. And again, Marxists, where the fuck are you? And if anything, you're just feeding that narrative of, you know, that Marxists are fascists. And actually, I believe most Marxists are fascists right now. You know, and so it's a disgrace, you know, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know how we get out of that, you know, but I'm definitely, you know, I don't know. I'm just frustrated with this amount of just submission to the official narrative, you know. And this is my last point, that the most educated, you know, a lot of Marxists, because they studied this shit in academic settings, they don't have a working understanding of capitalism, and they don't understand also humanity. And actually, I want to say that these truckers, by the fact that they have to earn a living by traveling, are probably more fucking educated and knowledgeable about humanity than any motherfucker. And I'm sorry, they can edit that, but any motherfucker that went to school and studied Marx in a fucking academic setting. They don't have a real understanding of what working class is. You know, the diversity of values, the diversity of opinions, the diversity of, you know, of experiences, you know, and so, you know, I do feel some pride in these truckers. You know, I'm still not very super optimistic, right? But I am watching, you know, and also it is showing, and I hope that this, just like the George Floyd thing, as flawed as that was, it shows that, because the ability of shit to just catch on fire when people have had enough of shit, you know, and, you know, how that can spread really quickly. You know, like the other night we had a conversation here with my friends, and they're kind of in different spectrums of the political, you know, they are leftists, they're not quite liberal, but they were giving me they were talking about how hopeless it feels, basically, that there is no way we can organize the US, right? And because it's so big and it's too many people. And then I'm like, I was reminded later that fucking India got 300 million people to strike, right? And I actually think it takes the ignorant people, what we're called the ignorant people, the uneducated. It will take those people, not the people that are comfortable just getting by and just like following the rules. It's the people that are used to living at the margin of the rules, you know, in that I actually have a sense of how fascistic and coercive capitalism is. So fuck Angela Davis. You know, like that's not the fucking Marxism I want on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
I forget who it was I heard referred to, just all of the liberals and so-called Marxists and anarchists who've been cheering this on the whole time, is like the laptop left. And I think that's such a perfect term. And these truckers, I mean, they've been taken for granted for so long. I mean, that job is fucking hard. Like driving one of those things for hours and hours on end, being paid, you know, not half of what you're worth. And, you know, what are they doing? They're bringing fucking food to all of these people who have been ordering shit off of Amazon and Instacart, right, for 2 years while they sit behind a laptop tweeting about, you know, how anybody that leaves their house is a fascist or a white supremacist. So I just think it's like, you think about like that comparison you made, Andy, between like the teachers who, yeah, I mean, we have the power to shut things down too, but we don't have any backbone. Like teachers have no fucking backbone. And these guys, I mean, they are willing to sacrifice what needs to be sacrificed because they've already been sacrificing. Like they've already been doing this. So I just, yeah. And it's interesting, like, cause I mean, everybody's been talking about the supply chain and how the supply chain is going to, you know, I mean, it's already been affected, but it's going to really amp up, right? And you're supposed to be stocking up on all your food. And I mean, it's kind of like, well, if the supply chain's going down anyway, we might as well hold it hostage, right? So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, yeah, I don't know what like percentage of truckers like in Canada are part of this. I keep seeing articles that are like, it's only, you know, they're not representative of Canadian truckers. And, you know, it's definitely not right. Everybody. But I mean, it doesn't take that big of a sector to really, really impact it, you know? And if people start realizing like, I can't get what I want delivered, the grocery store's kind of empty. It'll be interesting to see like who stands in solidarity still and who doesn't, you know, and says, well, I was behind it, but, you know, now I want my whatever.
Yeah, I think it makes a difference from whose side, if you will, the austerity comes from. Because I think a lot of these questions of the ongoing discussion about supply chains I think there's been questions about if there's sections of the capitalist class organizing some of these supply as a means of enriching themselves. But when workers actually control it, it's a different ballgame. Like when workers actually call the tune, then you can't. The capitalists, I don't think, are as nearly as comfortable with that situation. And you can see that workers find. I mean, they've already raised about $9 million on GoFundMe. They believe that they tell them, how long can you hold out? They say, well, now that we've gotten $9 million, well, we could probably hold out till 2023, 2024, and that's a big deal to me. Like for the possibility of them holding out and then another push around, well, whose supply chain, right? Whose supply chain who's going to decide when the supply chain goes up and down? If workers do it, then I actually think we can celebrate that, because when capitalists do it, it always is going to come at our expense. So that is huge, I think. And Kenny, I share your anger about this. Like, it is disgraceful, like, to see how the left that I was part of completely miss the idea when workers actually try to take things into their own hands. I thought this was like, even in the Russian Revolution, there were people who were saying, oh, who were these cooks and bakers who were going to run society? Like, that was sort of the intelligentsia and the liberals of the time were like, these dark masses who are going to come up and run Russia. Like, they don't know how to run Russia. So that was the kind of, the people who were making that revolution faced that kind of scorn of being called so ignorant that how are they going to run society? And here we are, Marxists of the day, heaping that same kind of scorn on these folks. And the fact is that these truckers didn't consult those Marxists, and they don't need to consult them, because they're just taking action based on their own experience. And that for now is enough. I don't think it will be enough for, like, at some point, the governments and the powers that be are going to find ways of co-opting sections and, punishing sections. That you do have to figure something out along the way that allows you to survive politically against our opponent. But for now, I think they're off to a very good start. For me, it's very promising. One line that I hear, well, this was, again, since there's no organization, there was one trucker leader, his name was Pat King, who I thought did a good interview. But he kind of counterposed. He was like, when BLM came out and was doing all these destructive things and taking the streets and stuff like that, then they were like supported by the politicians. When we come out, and we're regular working people, trying to fight back, we're heaped on scorn. Scorn is heaped upon us. And I feel like personally, I think that's a mistake to counterpose your movement, your fight with that fight. And to kind of suggest that we're the working class, but those folks aren't. I mean, they mentioned Antifa and things like that. Personally, I do think there are parts of that uprising that took place that were definitely working class, and that was definitely fueled by a similar kind of anger. And I understand there's people who were saying that there were plants in there and things like that, but I do feel like the response to racism that took place and what was called the violence of the response was as just as sincere, maybe not as organized, as what this guy's talking about. And I think he's making a mistake to say, well, we're working class people fighting back. That was something else. That's a division I feel like is going to be that can be exploited. But I did see how there was efforts to reach out to Native American people through the movement. Like there was some mistake that was made by a section of truckers to go into some area that was controlled by, or at least it was territory of the Algonquin First Nations. And I guess some of the truckers then pulled back or, expressed sorrow for kind of overstepping their bounds and things like that. So I do think there's that kind of sensitivity to trying to appeal to other oppressed sectors of the class and of populations. At least that's what I heard expressed. And so, again, it speaks to the idea that these are a bunch of right wingers. Like, that to me just is crazy. Yeah, that anybody who's paying attention to this could say that.
Did you guys watch the press conference that they did with a couple of the organizers? I thought there was an interesting moment in that because one of the organizers, she, I believe, is Métis, which is like basically mixed Native and European descent. And the other guy he was just kind of speaking to like, oh, I've learned so much from hearing her perspective, and she's clearly sort of in, you know, pretty regular contact with First Nations, and, you know, it doesn't seem like it's just sort of posturing like, oh yay, we have a couple Native people, you know, giving us their blessing. It seems like they're really talking, and I mean that's really important. I mean, that's I don't think that you can really have a real sort of grassroots, like, at least not a broad movement, if you're not gonna incorporate Indigenous voices. So that was cool to see. Also, a slightly different note, but not all the organizers are unvaccinated too, which, you know, is unsurprising to me, but I keep hearing people, you know, refer to the convoy as just a bunch of anti-vaxxers, like, oh, they don't want to. And again, like, that speaks to the sacrifice, because for the organizers and the participants who are vaccinated, they could just as well get their paycheck and scan their QR code and, you know, carry on. But they understand it's not about your fucking vaccine status. It's about something so much more frightening.
To me, this moment is very significant. I think that the ruling classes of the world are watching, because, you know, on one hand, from a conversation I had with Brian actually a long time ago, he was explaining to me, you know, the power that truckers gain from atomizing the system of production, right? Like when it was fragmented into parts of the world. And so truckers nowadays are very important for this global economy, right? They have to transport the things that are shipped from, you know, China and then spread it into, you know, and so they hold a lot of power, you know, in this system. And so for the same reason, they're going to face a lot of, you know, pressure to do the things that you are describing, Lips, and, you know, to split them, you know, to pin them against each other, to make sure this doesn't, you know, gain any more traction and awareness of your own power, to be honest. Because and so I think they will face a lot of challenges. You know, I don't know where it's going. I don't know what set of demands they could achieve, because they are fighting global forces. My only hope, again, is just like when we've talked about revolution, it needs to spread. You know, like these things need to spread in other places around the world. So I'm glad other people are noticing. In South America, my brother was telling me that some people are like talking about it too. You know, and just especially at this moment of Omicron, you know, where like I think there is a certain some awareness of some people where like, is this gonna continue? Like, isn't this the end of the, you know, of this story? But obviously they want the ruling class of the world have big stakes in enacting this society, these global governance systems that we're talking about. So they, you know, the Canadian truckers are going to face a lot of pressure because they have the attention of people. Obviously, we know that they're going to smear them with anti-vax, right-wing, or unlawful, disrespectful, right? Like they've been focusing on this story of one person dancing on the grave of the unnamed soldier in Canada. You know, they've also like, so
they put a flag on a statue.
You know, and this is where it's shameful, again, going back to the left, that we know this happens, right? We know this happens, and yet we fall for those tricks, right? And we fall along the line of dehumanizing our opponents, you know, and we, you know, the left uses the language that's dictated by, you know, the mainstream media, and that's the funny thing, you know, like everyone, there is no real massive opposition to these narratives of dehumanizing people who on a basic level as individuals, they're fighting for their livelihood because they are being sent to quarantine when they come back. How do you think they're gonna make money, right? And and at the same time, I also don't know, because I know my cousins during winter, they get to collect money because there is no work, but they work in a different industry. So there is a more of a social safety net in Canada. You know, everyone got $2,000. But so in a way, it tells me that this is not just about a livelihood. This is about like just the principles and just taking shit over and over, and just, you know, some lies, you know, being exposed. You know, people have enough of those lies, and so it's about many things, and it's a massive movement, at least for this fight. You know, and I would, you know, the hopeful in me is that, you know, truckers in other sectors of the society join and realize their real power. You know, that the real power of the ruling class is just based on trust. You know, and obviously there's systems of coercion and violence, but if you start trusting them, if you start believing their lies, you know, and even just like their fucking money, you know, like, which is just a symbol of our labor, you know, like we take over, you know, the real economy, not the stock market, not some fucking, you know, digital currency or NFT, you know, the real producers of society that sustain life. You know, that's my hope, that, you know, there is more sectors of society that can join and see through the lies. And you know, that brings me to what you were saying, Jessica, that I'm glad people are talking. You know, like people that do, there will be people that hold some more antiquated, you know, ideas, or ideas that oppose each other. But people have to talk and humanize each other in order to deal with those contradictions and oppositions that divide us, you know, and see the commonality in our struggle and why we are fighting this. And I hope fucking Marxists wake up, you know, and realize that this is a working class movement, you know, and that instead of just criticizing and throwing shit and speaking the imperial language, to join in, you know, and ask, what can we do, you know, and join and do actions and be like inspired by that.
I loved like that little clip of like seeing them play hockey, and you know, like these guys are posted up, so they're going to be sitting around a fire, gathering over food. I mean, there's going to be so much conversation to be had, just constant, you know, humanizing of their fellow workers and fellow human beings.
And one thing that I do hope becomes part of the discussion is obviously there's the digital surveillance that's part of what's they're talking about, the QR codes, and the biomedical, you know, freedom and the biosecurity system. That is actually they're really talking about that. But one thing I haven't heard, maybe it's been in the discussion, is AI and the replacement of the transportation sector by data, big data collection, and by AI systems that are being created. Because if anything was going to prove to the capitalists that they have to get humans out of the equation, this moment is it. And I imagine they understand that, but I think that those things being connected in as well, so that Silicon Valley is drawn directly into this as another opponent that has to be challenged and taken on. Because at least that's what it would mean for me, for at least the movement to politically spread, is for it to begin gather around that kind of understanding, in terms of, this is what I think all workers have to bear in mind about how we are all being replaced, and we're training our replacements with, you know, every time I autocorrect on Google, that's your AI right there. Like, it's getting better and better. It's like doing a much better job of like predicting the kinds of things I might say. I mean, I'm sorry, that's how I look at it. And
yeah, we're training it.
Yeah,
and we participate in it.
And I don't I think to myself, well, I'm not gonna price return and do it, but I still have to type letters in.
Yeah.
You know, and I have a feeling that it's learning, okay, you just matched the same letters that I was going to tell you, you know. So it's like over and over again we are seeing how the digital world is being turned into something that could be replace us in so many ways, and that I believe is going to become a growing conception of this movement, because it goes well beyond medical freedom.
You know, those like prove you're not a robot things. Every time I have to do one, I'm like, oh, I'm training the robots to eventually. It is really stupid seeing some people like cheer over Musk, like endorsing the convoy or whatever. It's like,
yeah,
Homeboy's actually like the one who's going to be making the trucks that, you know, they want to replace these guys. But I mean, it's definitely the 11th hour, but that technology doesn't seem to me to be ready, not at scale. I mean, they're always ahead of where they, you know, reveal that they are, but I don't know. What do you guys think Trudeau is going to do if he ever comes out of hiding?
I don't know. I mean, like they've pretty much said, well, we're ready to talk to him, you know?
Yeah.
I can't see him. Well, I don't know. I honestly don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they're certainly trying to think of what to do, as he, you know, like you said, he went into hiding and he said, oh, I was exposed to somebody with COVID and I got to like quarantine. And apparently his vaccine's not working so well. But I'm not sure. I don't know how what they're going to do with this thing, because it's not moving. And I mean, I think the possibility of, if there could be that convoy to Washington that would start, that would really start to put like flesh this thing out a little bit more. But I don't know.
And just, I guess, for people maybe who haven't heard, I mean, he made a statement, right, like about this fringe group of people. And what else did he say? The
fringe minority with unacceptable views, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And then, you know, he went on to use nationalism to say who's Canadian and who's not, typical, you know. And so it's very interesting. You know, I hadn't put in those two together, the fact that he has, quote unquote, COVID now, right, at this moment, because, you know, Canada has by and large stayed out of the news in terms of COVID-related issues, you know, and at least internationally, you know, and they have a lot of attention right now. I think because of, again, the truckers pushed the hand of, you know, of the ruling class, and so it's a chess game, right, at this point. And so where I mean, I do think it's important to just highlight something that we've talked about it in the show, is just the fact that in order to push back, to wield some power as a collective class, we do need to get together. We need to occupy space, physical space. It's not going to happen online. It's not going to happen through a post. You know, obviously you can use any tools of communication for various reasons. And I'm sure they've employed this, you know, to organize this. But again, it's just magical that, again, it's reasserting that point. We have to take over spaces, just like you said, Lipson. Teachers have to take over schools, you know, health workers have to take over their hospitals, you know, and run things without the dictatorship of their bosses, you know, and learn democracy in that way. And so, yeah, I myself, yeah, like you, I don't know what Trudeau is going to do. I think he's going to be under a lot of pressure, not just domestically, but internationally, you know, because they have to clamp down on this because they want to make an example out of this, right? Just like they did out of Australia, you know, when Australians didn't want to get vaccinated and they brought the goddamn army out, you know, and so that's any time you want to, you challenge power, you will face the weight of the system, you know, on you. You know, I'm sure there will be stories about the individual leaders, you know, who have some, you know, some shit that can come back and hunt them, you know, and these are things that they have to think about. But again, like, one thing is to resist, another thing is to fight back and push back, and you know that takes a long time. You know, that's not just about one policy. You know, that's about wielding collective power, and like imposing our will, as a class. And so, just like the people that listen to us, that some people are focusing to fight, the legal challenge legally, these mandates, understanding the limitations of that, that in some ways that's just reformist, that's never going for power, that's just resisting. And so that's the difference, at least for me as a socialist, between being a reformist and a revolutionary. Revolution is about taking power, imposing power, our collective democratic power over the forces that we're fighting every day. The vaccine situation is just the latest war, the latest front on the war on the working class. We've been fighting a war for, at this point, in modern capitalism, hundreds of years. It was feudalism before this. And, so we, again, we have to understand our power. I think that's where our lesson, have to understand power, how to do it democratically, and how to wield power democratically in order to really create a society that works for all of us, and so that's, again, always my hope when like movements like this happen, that they grow and that there are lessons learned, even in defeat, because again, the weight of the system comes on people that defy the system. And so, we can never go naively into a battle with, this class. And I think that's where Marxists are supposed to be, some sort of consciousness on that point, not to dictate, but to maybe provide some analysis of what's happening, what has happened. And that's where Marxism goes. I don't know who the hell I can listen to at this point. I don't. And at the same time, it's like also empower me to have my own ideas. Yeah. And that's why I also, advocate for this knowledge to be in the hands of everyday people. So you have your own ideas and you become part of a democratic process, so you're not just following anybody, whether it be some self-proclaimed socialist, leader, you should always have that anarchist spirit, at least in my point of view. I'm not going to let someone rule over me, over me and my people, and impose, things, especially all this shit that is dictations, right? All these policies over COVID, none of this has been consulted. It was first imposed, and then at this point, I wouldn't even trust a vote on that, because obviously, that this is rigged, but people have been already indoctrinated and they don't even know what the hell they're, to think anymore. But it's still, there is hope, right, in this, because there is people who challenge and haven't bought fully into the bullshit.
Yeah, just one thing that I would say, Jessica, if I was to imagine how they might do a counterattack, the thing that comes to mind is either a new round of Omicron spread in Ottawa being talked about, or I know there's talk about a new variant of Omicron. That would be the way I think you might try to weaken the support, is talk about some sort of health thing that's getting created as a result of these events and a result of this congregation. So that's something that maybe comes to mind, is an attempt to use the fear of the virus spreading, and that this event is a super spreader event, and to use that to etch away the support. That might come. That's one thing I imagine. I wonder if that's, in the consideration.
I did see that they're already criminalizing it. So January 28th, which was literally was that the day they arrived, around there? Okay, citing its powers under the COVID state of emergency. Of course, everything has been passed under this fucking state of emergency. Beginning March 2020, the government of Nova Scotia, Canada, has declared it illegal to finance, organize, aid, or participate in a truck convoy, and also to line the roadside in support of a truck convoy. Violators could face up to $10,000 fines. So I'm sure there's a lot of this type of bullshit that's going to be going through. But the reality is, if there's a critical mass, you know, like we saw the police in that clip, like they can't do anything.
Yeah. And other truckers have been saying that there are police showing up with food to the truckers.
Yeah.
So if it does depend on that kind of support still staying there, like they can't just decree things if people are not in support of those decrees. And that is a problem when you start laying the decrees out more and more and people don't follow them, is it really weakens your ability to make future decrees. But that I imagine you'd go at this with with talking about how people are getting sick.
Yeah. I mean, the racist like smears are powerful too, just because of the current culture of the laptop left.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I've only seen one actual like picture or footage of somebody with like a Confederate flag, right? And he was just like ushered out and they were like, go home. Like, I mean, I presume that was just a fed, but whatever. Right. But I mean, I'm sure they could amp up that type of, you know, agent provocateur stuff, and there could be violence, like there's always that potential. But I mean, they're already throwing like every smear in the book at them and it's not working.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's such a delicate thing because, like, you know, Nicaragua taught me a lot of things about rising up and the disinformation that happens, you know, on both sides, and exaggeration that happens on both sides. And so my point is that, you know, from Nicaragua, I also learned that, you know, like the powerful have to walk a fine line of wielding the courage, the physical, you know, monopoly on violence. Because what happened in Nicaragua was that some elders were protesting, right, peacefully, and then the agents of the state came and whacked them on the head, and then that just lit a fire on the whole society of Nicaragua. You know, so, you know, and that would be a strategic advantage, I would say, if used well by the truckers, that they have to push, you know, and like that's what also Jake has talked about, that these are things that you would have to, you know, push them to the brink, you know, where they overstep, you know, their strategy, because at that point, you know, if they're peacefully protesting and demanding, then other truckers might join, because, you know, they start seeing this. Other parts of society will join, you know, and because, like you said, Libson, like I think Jake also made that quote about when propaganda fails, then like the naked fist of the state is revealed. And so if people are non-compliant, you know, the only thing the state is going to have to do is to like force people to break it up, you know, and so, you know, those are things you have to wait as a movement. Like, how far do you push them, you know, the state, in order to assert your power, you know, because like the other thing is, I want to dissuade anyone listening who maybe finds some meaning to what I'm saying, is that you will not change society through rule and order bullshit. You don't, you know, that you're playing in their games, in their parameters, you're limited, you're bounded. And so you will have to defy their laws. You know, this has happened in every movement that has made any significant, you know, change. And so, you know, that's just part of the equation. You do, you know, you have to be strategic about it.
Well, that's mostly it for me. I didn't really think I could get I'm surprised at how much it has given me hope about the possibility of resistance. And it's in a fairly short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows, right? Like, things can turn really fast.
Yeah.
For the negative, but also for the positive, and it's more of us than we think.
Yep.
Don't discount the brutes, you know, the truckers in this case. You know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the intellectuals are gonna, you know, their shit.
they're just gonna condemn.
Yeah. Gotta get in line. That's what an intellectual would tell you. Get in line. Be patient.
Yes. Oh, it's so embarrassing. All right. So that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes, wherever you found this episode, or on our blog, what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find past episodes to our podcast and channel there. I remind people, if you fancy anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our 9 platforms: Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, Telegram, or Rumble. And if you'd like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. Well, Jessica and Kenny, thank you again. And Eduardo's still in Mexico. I thought he'd be back, but so I think it's going to be us coming back again next week. And maybe if Eduardo joins us, it'll be 4 of us.
And Eduardo, why would you come back to this hill? We do need you, but you know,
I heard there's some story out of Mexico though that's not good. Like they were, I don't know, I can't remember what it is. There's something going on in Mexico right now that is not.
I have heard that some of their policies are toughening up a little bit.
Yeah, I think I heard something like that. And I just can't
hopefully he's able to get back if he wants to get back.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, again, thank you both, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.